What is up, my people? My name's Chris, and this is Garage Noise, where we teach you how to build your skill and increase your knowledge about paint and body repair. It's a beautiful day here at the garage, and we got a beautiful paint job on this Dodge pickup, but it's got a couple nasty little scratches in it that we need to repair today. Now, we've got a tight area to work with on this blend and this repair, so I'm going to show you how I do that in this video. Now, this is a double feature video. First, we'll repair this damage, and I'll share with you exactly how we do that. Keep it tight and small, and then click on the link at the end, and I'll share with you how we paint, clear, and blend this panel in a tight space. Taking a good look at this scratch, and this is a really deep gouge or scratch down to the metal in some areas, and it may have created a little bit of a dent, so we're going to be aware of that and look out for that. But the first thing we need to do is feather the edge out on this paint and get it nice and smooth for a good transition for our body filler. So I'm going to use 180 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander. Now remember, we have a tight area to blend this panel. We do not want to go into the cab corner or the bedside. It's not going to do us much good anyway on a blend. So we're going to make sure the color's right and keep this repair small. Feathering out the scratch is when you gradually sand the edge of the scratch into the rest of the paint, creating a smooth transition where that hard edge was. So we're removing those hard edges of that scratch, making a smooth transition into the rest of the paint. You might wonder why we don't just sand this with 180 grit sandpaper and then fill it with some polyester filler and block it flat. Well, you can do that, and some guys will do that. I prefer feather edging the scratch out first, and the reason for that is if I were just to fill this scratch with some filler, down the road it's going to shrink and it's going to leave a hard edge where that scratch was, and you're going to be able to see that underneath your paint and clear. So I prefer to feather edge the scratch out. We are going to use some filler to make sure this is perfectly straight. This is what I found works the best. So to do that, we're going to use the edge of our orbital sander. I'm going to slightly tilt my orbital sander and gradually feather that back, and you can see the layers of primer and paint there. You want a smooth transition into the rest of the panel. As I'm sanding, I'll feel over this to make sure there's no ridges on the edge of that paint. Before I start sanding, you always want to clean it with wax and grease remover, and I cleaned this before I started sanding with wax and grease remover. Now I'm just going to clean it up again after I've sanded it, remove that dust, and then feel over this and make sure we've got a smooth transition in our paint edge. Now it may be a little bit wavy, but we're going to use some polyester filler to straighten that out. Now, I used 180 grit sandpaper to sand the scratch out, but you could use 320 or something less aggressive. It just goes a little bit quicker with the 180, so that's what I chose. Now we need to address the scratch in the front rear of this door. Now this is right near the edge, and we are blending into the rear door, but we do want to keep this repair small so we can blend into the front part of the door, but we have lots of area in the front of this door to blend, so we're not that concerned about it. So we're going to feather edge the scratch out once again. I'm using 180, and we're going to smooth it out and get it ready for a little bit of icing. Now I've mixed up a little bit of polyester glazing putty. This is a product called Icing. I've used this a lot in the past. It's a really good product, easy to work with, and if you're interested in any of the products or tools I use, you can find those links in the description. Now you want to keep this icing on the scratched area, the area that's been prepped out for filler. Now if you get a little bit on the paint, unsanded paint, it's not crucial because we're going to be blocking this out, so we'll be sanding that surrounding area a little bit. Just using a light thin coat over this repair area, and this is just going to help us block this panel straight, so we'll have some material. Now we might block all this material out and it might be perfectly straight, but this will fill any imperfections or any waves that we have left in this panel. After about 20 minutes, this polyester glazing putty is ready to be sanded. Now I'm going to use some 320 grit sandpaper on a firm short block, and the reason I'm using a short block is because I don't want to get deep scratches too far outside this repair area, because remember, we have a tight area where we need to blend this panel. So we want to keep those 320 grit scratches as far away from the edge of this panel as possible, because anywhere with 320 grit scratches will need to be painted. So I'm going to block this filler in an X pattern, and you can see here as I quickly sand this in time lapse, we're going to go in an X pattern to get this perfectly straight. On the front door, I'm going to use the DA to block this out, and you can see I'm holding my DA flat, and I'm going to machine sand it in an X pattern to block it straight. Now, I removed most of the filler, or all of the filler, from that front scratch. So now we're going to switch over to 600 grit sandpaper, and I'm going around the edge of this repair. Now, 600 grit scratches can be cleared over, so we're not concerned about going too close to the edge of that door. This is what we need to use to prep out this panel for a clear blend and a paint blend. So I'm going outside, and this is just in case I get a little bit of primer outside that repair area. I want it to be sanded and prepped for primer. We'll also do the same thing on the front door, and we'll clean up the edge of this door because it's got some door chips on the edge, and we're going to clean that up because we're going to paint those and take care of those as well. Once again, we'll prep out this area with some wax and grease remover, get all the dust removed and ready to be masked off and primed. Now that it's clean, I can inspect this area, feel over it one last time, make sure there's nothing I miss, look for any deep scratches, and if there are any scratches that need to be removed, you want to machine sand those out now before you prime it. So once you've inspected it and made sure it looks good, we can mask it off. Now I've folded the edge of my masking paper so I create a soft edge on the bottom here. Now we're going to mix up some primer, and the primer we're using today is the Roberlo R1. This is a 2K urethane primer. It's a catalyzed primer that hardens over the repair area. We don't need a lot of primer, so we're just mixing up a small amount. This mixes up 4 to 1. We'll lock in the PPS cap and our 3M performance gun. We are going to use the 1.4 tip. This is not a real thick primer that's going to cause problems, and you don't need a real large tip to spray it. Now, if you look at how we mask this off, I folded the edge on the front, and I'm keeping it as small as possible. I've dialed down my volume and my air pressure and my fan pattern so I can be very exact to where I put this primer. So by rolling the edge of the paper, we've created a soft edge when we prime. We don't want to have any hard edges of primer. That makes it more difficult to sand out and could create problems in your paint and clear coat. Okay, so now we have this all in primer with the 2K urethane primer. It's sanded around the edge with 600 grit sandpaper to prep it out for a blend and for the primer. We have a few dents here we need to take care of. There's one there and one there. We're going to remove the handles for that, but that's going to be in a different video. What I want to show you is what the next step in prepping this out for paint is, okay? What we need to do is we need to block this primer, okay? It's already pretty straight. We block the body filler, and that helps get it straight so we have less blocking to do when after we primer it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a small block, a firm block with 320 grit sandpaper, and we're going to block this in an X pattern and smooth out this primer. We want to remove all the texture in this primer. So it's got texture. It even has a little sag here or a run in the primer. You really don't want to get runs in your primer if you can help it, but occasionally that happens. So we're going to block sand that out. It will sand out. This one we're probably not going to have to use a guide coat, but if you have a larger area that you're blocking of body filler, you may want to spray a guide coat on there. And what that is, you could spray it on, or they have guide coat that you wipe on, and it's just a powder substance that leaves black in the texture, and when you block it, it'll show you any high or low areas in your primer. So let's go ahead and block this out and see what we have. I will spray a guide coat on this just to show you how that process works. Okay, so now we have some 320 grit sandpaper here on this short block. And I'm just going to hold it flat and block it in an X pattern. Now you can see how the textures, it's showing the texture with the guide coat. What we want to do is make sure that's smooth. Now you could probably use a DA for this, but I want to show you the process of blocking it straight. And remember, we're not trying to get out too far over here. This is all 600, so we can blend our paint right there. But we don't want to get 320 grit scratches here where we have to put paint over. So a 320 grit scratch is something you're going to need to put paint over. So as we're blocking this, this is showing us where there are any high or low areas. You can see we're blocking this primer down first because there's a little bit of a low area here, or this might be a little high. So this helps straighten the panel. So after you paint it, after you clear coat it, you don't see any waves or anything that looks like there's been bodywork done. Okay, now I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to hold it flat, and I'm going to run quickly and feel all over this panel just to see if I can feel any waves. And that's how you do it. If you run quickly over it, your hand's going to be able to tell if there's any waves in this repair. And I can feel that this is very straight. Nothing that is going to, it might have just a little wave there, but nothing that's going to show up underneath your paint and clear coat. So this is ready to be sprayed. We are going to go over this area with the DA with 600, just get some uniform scratches in it. Not entirely necessary, you don't have to do that, but I like to run over it with 600. Sometimes like there's a little bit of area here that has a light mist of primer that we want to sand off, but we don't want to get 320 scratches out here. So we're going to run over it with 600 to remove those and get this prepped out for paint. Now these two panels are ready to be prepped out, painted, and cleared. And remember, I'm going to show you exactly how we do a tight blend on this rear door. So click on this video now and let's finish up this repair.